Blood trickled down Malcolm's temple as TSA agents pinned him against the cold floor. Behind him, Elaine Cooper smirked, her designer purse still clutched to her chest. "He attacked me," she announced to the growing crowd. Little did she know the airport's high-definition cameras had captured everything. Where are you watching from today? Before we dive into this shocking story of privilege gone wrong, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what happens when this entitled passenger tries to bend the rules and gets the surprise of her life. Trust me, the security footage reveals a truth no one saw coming. Malcolm Reynolds yawned as he swiped his security badge at the employee entrance of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The digital clock on the wall read 4:30 a.m., another early morning in the life of a TSA supervisor. At 32, Malcolm carried himself with the discipline of his military background, his uniform pressed to perfection despite the ungodly hour. Morning boss called Jamal Washington, a fellow TSA agent who had been with the agency for 3 years, ready for another day in paradise. Malcolm smiled, the exhaustion momentarily lifting from his face. As ready as I'll ever be. Holiday season's over, but the passengers don't seem to have gotten the memo. The two men walked through the sprawling terminal, their footsteps echoing in the relative quiet before the morning rush. For Malcolm, the job was more than just a paycheck. Since his brother-in-law had died unexpectedly last year, he'd been helping his sister Tamara raise her 8-year-old son DeAndre. The stability of government employment meant everything now that he was supporting his extended family. "How's Tamara holding up with the custody hearing?" Jamal asked, as if reading Malcolm's thoughts. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "It's today at 6. Her ex-husband's parents are still fighting for partial custody. I need to be there." "Don't worry, man. We'll make sure you get out on time," Jamal assured him, patting him on the shoulder. As they approached the security command center, Sofia Rodriguez, the airport's security camera technician, waved them over. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes bright despite the early hour. "Morning, gentlemen." They just finished installing the final updates to the new camera system, she announced proudly. "Facial recognition, behavior analytics, the works. This system can track a passenger from entrance to gate without missing a beat. Let's hope it makes our jobs easier and not just creates more paperwork," Malcolm replied with a wry smile. The morning briefing was held in a windowless room where Chief Security Officer Patterson ran through the day's priorities. "We've got intelligence about potential security concerns this week, so stay sharp. Remember, professionalism is our best defense. No matter what passengers throw at you, literally or figuratively, you represent the Department of Homeland Security." Malcolm nodded, though his mind briefly drifted to the custody hearing. He couldn't afford any issues today. Too much was at stake for his family. As the briefing ended and agents dispersed to their stations, Malcolm felt a familiar knot in his stomach. Every day brought a new set of challenges, frustrated travelers, tight connections, and occasionally people who believed rules applied to everyone but themselves. He developed a thick skin over the years, but the subtle and not-so-subtle microaggressions wore on him. Just yesterday, an older white woman had asked to speak to whoever's really in charge when he'd explained why her oversized toiletries couldn't go through. The week before, a businessman had questioned his authority when Malcolm selected him for a random screening. These incidents were common enough that most days Malcolm let them roll off his back, focusing instead on the job at hand, keeping everyone safe. He took his position overlooking the main security checkpoint, watching the lines begin to form as the first wave of morning travelers arrived. From his vantage point, he could monitor all 6 lanes and step in where needed. The new cameras Sofia had mentioned gleamed from their strategic positions throughout the terminal. At least today, if anything happened, there would be irrefutable evidence. "Looks like we're in for a busy one," Jamal commented as he joined Malcolm. The line was already stretching back toward the check-in, counters a sea of tired faces and rolling luggage. Post-holiday blues. Everyone's heading back to real life. Malcolm nodded. "Let's keep it moving. I can't afford any overtime today. Little did he know his carefully planned day was about to unravel in ways he couldn't imagine. Elaine Cooper slammed the door of her Lexus SUV and thrust her keys at the valet without making eye contact. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair was swept into an immaculate updo, not a strand out of place despite her obvious agitation. At 45, Elaine had cultivated the kind of polished appearance that announced her status before she even opened her mouth. Designer handbag, tailored suit, and the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting her way. "Be careful with it," she snapped at the young valet, who nodded politely. Elaine didn't notice his expression fall as she turned away, already pulling out her phone. "Richard, it's me," she spoke sharply into the device as she entered the airport terminal. "The board meeting's been moved up, and I need to be in Chicago by noon." "Yes, I know it's last minute. That's why I'm calling you, for God's sake." She paused at the crowded check-in area, her irritation visibly mounting. "What do you mean they're booked? I'm a Platinum Elite member. Make it happen." Elaine ended the call with a frustrated tap and surveyed the scene with disdain. The holiday season might have officially ended, but Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was still teeming with travelers. Lines snaked throughout the terminal, families with crying children, college students returning to school, business travelers like herself trying to navigate the chaos. "Excuse me," she said, bypassing the line and approaching the premium check-in counter directly. "I need to get on the 930 flight to Chicago, executive class." The airline representative, a middle-aged woman with a practiced smile, glanced at the line Elaine had just skipped. "Of course, ma'am, but I'll need to ask you to wait in line, like everyone else." "Do you know who I am?" Elaine's voice carried, causing several heads to turn. "I'm the senior vice president of Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I don't have time for lines." "I understand, ma'am, but—" "Call your manager," Elaine interrupted. "Now." As the representative reluctantly reached for the phone, Elaine tapped her manicured nails against the counter. Her phone rang, and she answered immediately. "Elaine Cooper," she said. "Yes, Charles, I'm trying to get to the meeting, but I'm dealing with incompetent airport staff. No, I will not calm down. Do you know what I had to do to secure the Westlake acquisition?" She turned away from the counter, lowering her voice slightly, but not enough to prevent others from hearing. "These people don't understand how the real world works. They punch a clock and collect a paycheck. They have no concept of what we do." Several travelers exchanged uncomfortable glances. A young black woman standing in line rolled her eyes, and Elaine shot her a cold look before continuing her conversation. The manager arrived, a harried-looking man who clearly wanted to resolve the situation quickly. "Miss Cooper, we'd be happy to assist you, but we do need to respect the process." "The process," Elaine repeated with a bitter laugh. "Let me tell you about process. I've spent millions with your airline. I'm trying to close a deal worth billions. Every minute I spend in this godforsaken line costs money. Real money. Not the kind you people think about." The manager's smile remained fixed, though his eyes hardened. "I understand. Let me check what we can do." After several tense minutes, Elaine was checked and her executive class seat confirmed. She snatched her boarding pass with neither thanks nor acknowledgement, already mentally calculating her next move. The security checkpoint appeared even more crowded than the check-in area. Hundreds of passengers stood in winding lines, removing shoes, laptops, and liquids with the resigned efficiency of modern travelers. TSA agents directed traffic, their voices blending into the terminal's ambient noise. From his supervisory position, Malcolm Reynolds noticed the blonde woman in the expensive suit the moment she entered the security area. Years of experience had taught him to spot potential problems, and everything about her body language, the tense shoulders, the impatient scanning of the crowd, the entitled tilt of her chin set off warning bells. "That one's trouble," he murmured to Jamal, who followed his gaze and nodded in agreement. Elaine stood at the entrance to the security lines, visibly calculating her options. The regular line stretched far beyond what she deemed acceptable. The pre-check line was shorter but still substantial. She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through contacts. "Greg, it's Elaine. I'm at Atlanta Hartsfield. Do we still have that contact in airport security? Well, find out. I have a flight in less than an hour, and this place is a disaster." She paced as she waited, drawing irritated glances from travelers who had accepted their fate in line. When her phone rang again, her face fell. "What do you mean?" he retired. "Isn't there someone else?" "Fine. Useless, all of you." Elaine glared at the security checkpoint, as if it were a personal affront. Her internal justifications built upon themselves. She paid more in taxes than most of these people earned in a year. She had important business that affected the economy. The rules were meant for ordinary people, not someone of her status and responsibility. In the security command center, Sofia Rodriguez noticed the agitated woman on her monitors. The new system had flagged her elevated stress levels and aggressive movement patterns. "Potential situation at checkpoint 3, she noted. Zooming in. Female traveler showing signs of agitation. Malcolm's voice came through her headset. "I see her, keeping an eye on it." As Elaine's frustration reached a boiling point, the security line inched forward with excruciating slowness. The large wall clock showed 8:45 a.m. Her flight was at 9:30. The math wasn't working in her favor, and Elaine Cooper wasn't accustomed to losing. Time was running out, and Elaine Cooper had made her decision. With practiced confidence, she strode directly toward the pre-check line, bypassing dozens of waiting passengers. An elderly couple with matching luggage stood at the back of the line, and Elaine slipped past them without hesitation. "Excuse me, dear," the older woman said gently. "The line starts back there." Elaine barely spared her a glance. "I have a flight to catch. This is an emergency." She continued forward, ignoring the murmurs of discontent that followed her. A few passengers exchanged looks but seemed unwilling to confront her directly. This passive response only reinforced Elaine's sense of entitlement. People always back down eventually. Malcolm had been monitoring the situation from his position and immediately noticed the disruption. He signaled to a junior TSA agent, Kendra Williams, who approached Elaine with professional composure. "Ma'am," Kendra said politely but firmly, "I need to ask you to return to the end of the line." Elaine barely looked at the young black woman in uniform. "I'm a pre-check member, and my flight leaves in 45 minutes. I don't have time for this." "I understand your concern, ma'am, but all pre-check members need to wait in the designated line." Kendra maintained her calm demeanor despite Elaine's dismissive tone. "Do you know how much I pay in fees every year?" Elaine's voice rose slightly. "I need to speak to your supervisor, someone who can actually make decisions." Malcolm, seeing the escalation, made his way over. As the TSA supervisor on duty, conflict resolution was a key part of his job. He'd handled difficult passengers countless times and had developed a thick skin for the particular brand of entitlement that often manifested in these situations. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Supervisor Reynolds. Is there a problem here?" His voice was measured and professional. Elaine took in Malcolm's appearance, his dark skin, his supervisor's uniform, his composed expression, and her lips thinned almost imperceptibly. "Yes, there's a problem. I'm going to miss my flight because of these ridiculous lines. And your staff," she gestured dismissively, "at Kendra isn't being helpful. I need an accommodation." "I understand your frustration," Malcolm replied, "but I'm afraid the rules apply to everyone. Pre-check members still need to wait in the pre-check line. It's moving quickly, and if you're concerned about your flight—" "I don't think you do understand," Elaine cut him off. "I have an executive meeting that affects thousands of jobs. Surely you can make an exception in this case." Around them, passengers had begun to take notice of the confrontation. Some watched openly, while others pretended to be occupied with their phones and luggage. A few had started recording the interaction, their phones held discreetly. "Ma'am, I cannot allow you to cut in front of other passengers who have been waiting patiently," Malcolm explained, his voice still even. "If your flight is that urgent, I suggest speaking with your airline about rebooking options." Elaine's face flushed with anger. "I want to speak to someone in charge," she demanded. "I am the supervisor on duty," Malcolm replied calmly. She looked him up and down, skepticism evident in her expression. I find that hard to believe. Where's the actual person in charge?" The racial undertones in her statement weren't lost on anyone within earshot. An uncomfortable silence fell over the immediate area. Malcolm had experienced this kind of coded language throughout his career, and while it stung, he remained composed. "Ma'am, I've been a TSA supervisor for 5 years. I assure you I am authorized to handle this situation, and I'm asking you to return to the end of the line." Elaine pulled out her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. "This is unacceptable. I'm calling your director right now. I have connections you can't imagine." As she made her call, loudly complaining about harassment and incompetent staff, passengers in line became increasingly uncomfortable. Some voiced support for Malcolm while others looked away, unwilling to get involved. "My flight leaves in 40 minutes, Elaine nearly shouted into her phone. "I'm being prevented from getting through security by staff who clearly don't understand who they're dealing with." Malcolm signaled to Jamal, who approached to provide backup. The situation was escalating beyond a simple line dispute. "Ma'am," Malcolm tried again. "I need to ask you one final time to return to the end of the line, or we'll need to escort you out of the security area." Elaine lowered her phone, her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me? Because that would be a very poor decision on your part." The tension in the air was palpable. Other TSA agents had noticed the disturbance and positioned themselves strategically nearby. In the security command center, Sophia watched the confrontation unfolding on her monitors, her finger hovering over the button that would alert airport police. What had started as a simple attempt to skip the line had evolved into a power struggle that neither side was prepared to lose. Elaine Cooper's patience had evaporated completely. As Malcolm stood firm in his position, she clutched her designer coffee tumbler, a 20-ounce stainless steel status symbol from a high-end brand, and in one swift motion flung its contents directly at his uniform. The hot liquid splashed across Malcolm's chest and faced the dark coffee, creating an instant stain on his crisp blue shirt. He flinched at the sudden heat, but remained standing, droplets running down his face and neck. The surrounding crowd gasped collectively. Did you all see that Elaine's voice was shrill with manufactured outrage? "He tried to touch me. I was defending myself." Malcolm, dripping with coffee, took a deep breath. The humiliation burned hotter than the liquid that was soaking through his shirt. In his military days, such a provocation might have warranted an immediate response, but years of TSA training had taught him restraint. Still, the effort it took to maintain his composure was visible in the tightness of his jaw and the rigid set of his shoulders. "Ma'am, you just assaulted a federal officer," he stated, his voice remarkably steady. "That's a serious offense." In the security command center, Sofia Rodriguez's eyes widened as she witnessed the coffee attack on her monitors. Immediately, she began saving and bookmarking the footage from multiple camera angles, making sure the incident was preserved in its entirety. "Command to all units, we have an assault on a TSA supervisor at Checkpoint 3, she reported into her headset, initiating full documentation protocol. Back at the checkpoint, Elaine had already shifted into performance mode. She pulled out her phone and began recording selectively, carefully framing the shot to show only Malcolm's stern expression and not the coffee stain evidence of her assault. "I'm being harassed by airport security," she narrated into her phone camera. "They're singling me out because I asked a simple question about expediting the process." Jamal and 2 other TSA agents had quickly moved to Malcolm's side, creating a protective barrier between him and Elaine. Around them, the crowd had divided into factions. Some passengers who had witnessed the entire confrontation were vocally supporting Malcolm. "She threw coffee at him," a college student exclaimed. "That was completely uncalled for," an elderly man added. Others, who had only tuned in after the commotion began, seemed confused or even suspicious of the TSA response. "Why are so many officers surrounding her?" someone whispered. "Are they targeting her?" Another wondered. Elaine, sensing the division in the crowd, played to her perceived supporters. "They're intimidating me because I stood up for myself. This is what happens when you question authority." Malcolm wiped coffee from his eyes, speaking calmly into his radio. "Supervisor Reynolds, requesting assistance at checkpoint 3. We have a disruptive passenger who has assaulted a TSA officer." Elaine's eyes flashed with genuine alarm at the word assaulted, but she quickly recovered. "That's a lie. I was defending myself." She turned to the bystanders. "You all saw it, didn't you? He was threatening me." Her phone was still out, still recording as she made another call. "Gregory, it's me again. I need you to contact Senator Williams immediately. Yes, it's an emergency. I'm being harassed by power-hungry security agents at Atlanta Airport. They've surrounded me. I don't feel safe." Have you ever witnessed someone completely fabricate a story to make themselves the victim? Comment number 1, if you've seen entitled behavior like Elaine's before, or number 2, if you think Malcolm handled the situation professionally so far. Hit that like button if you're shocked by the coffee attack. I know I was. And subscribe right now, because you won't believe what Elaine does next. Is our justice system prepared to handle people who use their privilege as a weapon? The tension in the terminal continued to build. Passengers who had been quietly waiting in line now found themselves unwilling spectators to an increasingly volatile confrontation. Some began filming with their phones, creating multiple records of the unfolding drama. Elaine, still on her phone, spotted a man in a business suit watching from nearby. "Excuse me, sir," she called out, her voice deliberately trembling. "Would you mind telling these officers that I've done nothing wrong? They're targeting me." The businessman, caught off guard at being addressed, hesitated. I just got here. I didn't see what happened." "They're trying to detain me for asking a question," Elaine insisted, tears suddenly welling in her eyes. A practiced performance that had served her well in countless confrontations over the years. Malcolm, still maintaining his professional demeanor despite the coffee soaking his uniform, addressed the growing crowd. "Folks, please step back and continue through the security process. We have the situation under control." But Elaine wasn't finished. Her voice rose to ensure everyone could hear. "Is this how you treat all your passengers? Or just white women traveling alone?" The racial inversion of her claim, implying she was being targeted because she was white, sent a ripple of disbelief through those who had witnessed her assault on Malcolm. Jamal, standing beside his supervisor, visibly tensed at the audacity of her statement. "Ma'am," Malcolm said firmly, "this has nothing to do with race and everything to do with your behavior. You assaulted a federal officer, and there will be consequences." "Consequences?" Elaine laughed bitterly. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "I have the governor's private number in my contacts. One call and your job disappears faster than you can say minimum wage." The threats continued to escalate, each more outlandish than the last. And as airport police finally approached the scene, Elaine Cooper's performance reached its crescendo, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change multiple lives forever. The arrival of airport police should have de-escalated the situation, but it only emboldened Elaine further. Seeing the uniformed officers approaching, she sensed an opportunity to shift the narrative in her favor. With calculated precision, she stepped toward the security checkpoint, directly challenging Malcolm's authority. "I'm going to my gate now," she announced loudly. "My flight leaves in 30 minutes, and I've wasted enough time with this ridiculous harassment." Malcolm moved to block her path, maintaining a professional distance. "Ma'am, you cannot proceed through security at this point. You've assaulted a federal officer, and we need to address that first." Elaine's eyes narrowed as she sized up the situation. The approaching police officers hadn't yet been briefed on what had transpired. In that brief window of uncertainty, she made her move. With surprising quickness, she lunged forward toward the metal detector, attempting to force her way past Malcolm. As he instinctively raised his hands not to touch her but to create a barrier, Elaine executed her plan. "Don't touch me," she screamed at a volume that echoed throughout the terminal. Then, with theatrical precision, she threw herself backward, dropping to the ground with a dramatic flair worthy of a professional stunt performer. Her designer purse went flying, its contents spilling across the floor. Elaine landed hard, immediately clutching her arm and crying out in apparent pain. "He pushed me. Did everyone see that he pushed me?" The chaos that followed was immediate and intense. Passengers gasped and backed away. The airport police, witnessing only Elaine on the ground and Malcolm standing over her, rushed forward with heightened urgency. "Sir, step back, step back." Now one officer shouted, his hand moving to his holster. Malcolm raised his hands, coffee still dripping from his uniform. "Officer, I didn't touch her. She threw herself." But his explanation was cut short as two airport police officers grabbed him, roughly spinning him around and forcing him face down onto the cold terminal floor. The sudden takedown was executed with the efficiency of trained law enforcement, but without the context of what had actually transpired. "I am a TSA supervisor," Malcolm managed to say as a knee pressed into his back. "Check with security cameras. She assaulted me first with coffee, then faked a fall." Blood began to trickle from Malcolm's temple where it had struck the hard floor during the takedown. The sight of a black man in uniform being restrained by police created an immediate visual that transcended the complex reality of the situation. Jamal rushed forward, his hands also raised. "Officers, he's telling the truth. Supervisor Reynolds didn't touch her. We have the whole thing on camera." Elaine, still on the floor, had transitioned from screams to pitiful sobbing. "I was just trying to catch my flight," she whimpered loud enough for everyone to hear. "He got aggressive when I questioned the line procedure." A small crowd of passengers had formed a ring around the scene, many with phones raised, capturing the dramatic confrontation. The videos would later go viral, though many would begin recording only after Malcolm was already on the ground, missing the crucial context of Elaine's fabricated fall. From her position at the security command center, Sophia watched in horror as her colleague and friend was pinned to the floor. "This is wrong," she muttered, fingers flying across her keyboard as she compiled video evidence from multiple camera angles. "Command to all units," she spoke urgently into her headset. "We have complete footage of the incident at Checkpoint 3. The female subject assaulted Supervisor Reynolds and then deliberately fell to the ground without being touched. I'm sending video confirmation now." But on the ground, the immediate reality was playing out according to Elaine's script. As Malcolm lay restrained, blood trickling down his face, she managed to stand with the assistance of a concerned passenger, making sure to wince and clutch her arm for maximum effect. "I want to press charges," she announced, her voice carrying. "This man assaulted me. I want him arrested." The lead police officer, a sergeant named Davis, approached her with a notepad. "Ma'am, can you tell me exactly what happened?" As Elaine began spinning her tale of victimhood, Malcolm remained pinned to the floor, his thoughts racing not to his own predicament, but to his sister's custody hearing that evening. If he was detained, if there were charges filed against him based on this woman's lies, he wouldn't be there to support Tamara. The potential consequences cascaded through his mind. Like falling dominoes, his career, his reputation, his family's stability, all at risk because of one entitled woman's refusal to follow the same rules as everyone else. Officer Malcolm said, his voice steady despite his position. Please check the security footage before making any decisions. There are cameras covering every angle of this checkpoint." Sergeant Davis glanced up at the security cameras, then at the growing crowd of witnesses with varying perspectives on what had transpired. The situation was complex and volatile, with racial dynamics that couldn't be ignored. He made a decision. "Take him to the airport security office," he instructed his officers, "and get statements from all witnesses. No one leaves until we sort this out." As Malcolm was helped to his feet and led away in front of hundreds of travelers, Elaine Cooper stood watching, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The smirk vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a continued performance of trauma and victimhood. "I just want to get to my meeting," she said tearfully to Sergeant Davis. "This whole thing has been so traumatic." Little did she know, the high-definition security cameras had captured every calculated move, every manufactured expression, and every moment of her elaborate deception. The truth was preserved in digital clarity, waiting to be revealed. The fluorescent lights of the airport security office cast harsh shadows across Malcolm's face as he sat in a straight-back chair, a tissue pressed to his bleeding temple. The small room typically used for questioning suspicious travelers now held an unusual assembly. Malcolm, 2 airport police officers, Chief Security Officer Patterson, who had arrived after hearing about the incident, and Jamal, who had insisted on staying with his supervisor. Outside, the situation at the checkpoint had finally normalized, with passengers being directed to alternate screening lanes while the area was cleared. Elaine Cooper had been escorted to a separate room where she continued her performance of injured innocence, demanding Malcolm's arrest between calls to her attorney and various connections she claimed would rain consequences down upon everyone involved. "I want to make this absolutely clear," Malcolm stated, his voice firm, despite the circumstances. "At no point did I touch Miss Cooper. She threw coffee at me, attempted to force her way through the checkpoint, and then deliberately threw herself to the ground while shouting that I had pushed her." Sergeant Davis, the police officer in charge, maintained a neutral expression. "We'll review all available evidence, sir. In the meantime, I need your official statement." As Malcolm recounted the events in precise detail, his mind kept returning to his sister's custody hearing. The wall clock showed 10:15 a.m. The hearing was at 6:00 p.m. If this situation wasn't resolved quickly, he wouldn't make it. The thought made his stomach clench with anxiety. "What time is your sister's hearing?" Jamal asked, quietly, noticing Malcolm's frequent glances at the clock. 6. Across town in Decatur, Malcolm replied. Chief Patterson, overhearing this, frowned. "We'll do our best to get this cleared up, Reynolds. But with allegations this serious..." The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Everyone in the room understood the implications. A white woman claiming assault by a black man, even one in a TSA uniform, carried centuries of complicated history and prejudice. The evidence would need to be overwhelming to overcome those default assumptions. In the Security Command Center, Sophia worked frantically, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she compiled footage from every possible angle. The new security system was proving its worth, capturing details the old cameras might have missed. "Got it?" she muttered triumphantly as she isolated a perfect view of Elaine throwing the coffee, followed by her staged fall several minutes later. The footage was crystal clear, showing that Malcolm had never laid a hand on her. Sophia immediately began transferring the files to a secure drive. Meanwhile, in a private office near the checkpoint, Elaine Cooper sat with her legs crossed, speaking sharply into her phone. "Richard, this is ridiculous. I'm being detained because some power-tripping security guard couldn't handle being questioned by a woman." She listened for a moment, then continued. "No, I don't care what it costs. Get the best attorney in Atlanta here now. I want him arrested and I want compensation for this trauma." She ended the call and immediately placed another. "Senator Williams's office, please. Tell him it's Elaine Cooper and it's urgent." The confident set of her shoulders suggested she fully expected the political machinery to start turning on her behalf. What Elaine didn't know was that outside her room, statements were being collected from dozens of witnesses who had seen the entire confrontation unfold. The tide of testimony was turning decisively against her version of events. She definitely threw the coffee first, confirmed a college student who had been recording the incident on her phone. "I've got it right here." "That woman was out of control," added an elderly gentleman. "The TSA agent never laid a finger on her. She put on quite a performance when she fell, though. I've seen better acting in community theater." Back in the security office, Malcolm's phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Where are you? Need to prep for hearing. Lawyer wants to meet at 4. His heart sank as he typed a response. "Held up at work. Situation developing. Will update as soon as possible." How could he explain that his career, possibly his freedom, was hanging in the balance because of a woman who couldn't be bothered to wait in line like everyone else? Chief Patterson's radio crackled to life. "Chief, this is Rodriguez from Command. I have complete footage of the Cooper incident compiled and ready for review. You're going to want to see this immediately." Patterson glanced at Malcolm, then at Sergeant Davis. "Let's go see what we've got." As they left the room, Jamal leaned toward Malcolm. "Sophia comes through. Always." Malcolm nodded, allowing himself a small flicker of hope. But years of experience had taught him that even with evidence, justice wasn't always straightforward, especially for someone who looked like him. In another part of the terminal, a crowd had gathered around several passengers who were showing their phone recordings of the incident. News of the confrontation had spread through the airport, and social media was already buzzing with partial videos and conflicting accounts. Without context, some of the videos, particularly those starting after Elaine was already on the ground, painted a potentially damaging picture. Number: TSA assault. Trending in Atlanta, someone commented, scrolling through Twitter, "This is going to be big." What had started as a simple enforcement of security line protocol had escalated into a potential career-ending disaster with implications that extended far beyond the airport. As Malcolm waited for the footage to be reviewed, he closed his eyes briefly, thinking of his nephew DeAndre, who had already lost a father and now might see his uncle's reputation destroyed over a cup of coffee and an entitled lie. The next hour would determine not just Malcolm's professional fate, but whether he would be present to support his sister in one of the most important moments of her life. Chief Patterson, Sergeant Davis, and 2 other officers crowded around a large monitor in the Security Command Center. Sophia Rodriguez stood beside them, her posture tense but confident as she queued up the compiled security footage. "I've synchronized multiple camera angles for continuous coverage," she explained, her voice steady. "The system automatically backs up to secure cloud storage every 30 seconds, so there's no possibility of footage being deleted or altered." The group watched in silence as the confrontation played out from beginning to end in high-definition clarity. The evidence was irrefutable. Elaine Cooper deliberately throwing hot coffee at Malcolm. Her attempts to force her way through security, and most damningly, her theatrical fall, with no physical contact from any TSA personnel. "Well, I'll be damned," Sergeant Davis murmured, shaking his head. "She put on quite a performance." Chief Patterson's face had darkened with each passing minute of footage. "This is assault on a federal officer filing a false report and disruption of airport security procedures. Serious charges." "There's more," Sophia said, tapping a key to switch camera angles. "Our new audio enhancement picked this up." The footage continued now, with crisp audio capturing Elaine's words during the confrontation. Several racial slurs and derogatory comments were clearly audible, along with her explicit threats to use political connections to have Malcolm fired. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. What had initially been approached as a complex situation with potential racial overtones was now unmistakably clear. A privileged woman had assaulted a federal officer, fabricated an attack, and attempted to leverage both race and connections to escape consequences. "Get Reynolds in here," Chief Patterson ordered, his decision made, "and prepare to detain Miss Cooper." In the small holding room, Malcolm sat with his head in his hands, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. When the door opened, he looked up to see Chief Patterson, his expression unreadable. Reynolds Patterson began, then paused. His formal demeanor softened slightly. "Malcolm, we've reviewed the footage." Malcolm straightened, bracing himself. "The evidence is conclusive," Patterson continued. "Miss Cooper assaulted you, attempted to breach security, and then falsified an attack. You acted with complete professionalism throughout the incident." The relief that flooded through Malcolm was so intense it was almost painful. He exhaled slowly, nodding as the tension began to release from his shoulders. "We owe you an apology for how this was initially handled." Sergeant Davis added, stepping forward. "The takedown was premature, based on incomplete information." Malcolm knew this was as close to an official acknowledgement of racial bias as he was likely to receive, and he accepted it with a nod. "What happens now?" "Now," Chief Patterson said, "we're going to have a conversation with Miss Cooper about the consequences of assaulting a federal officer and filing a false report." The scene in Elaine Cooper's holding room was markedly different. As Sergeant Davis entered with another officer, she was in the middle of yet another phone call, her voice sharp with entitlement. "I don't care what you have to do. Get me out of here now, or heads will roll." Miss Cooper, Sergeant Davis interrupted. "Please end your call. We need to speak with you." Elaine held up one finger in a wait gesture, the universal sign of someone who believed their time was more valuable than others. "I'll have to call you back. My release paperwork is finally being processed." She ended the call with a satisfied tap. "It's about time. I've missed my flight, but I expect the airline will accommodate me once they understand the circumstances." "That's not why we're here," Sergeant Davis said evenly. "We've reviewed the security footage of the incident." Something in his tone caused Elaine's confident smile to falter. "Good. Then you've seen how that agent assaulted me." "Actually, Miss Cooper, we've seen you throw coffee at Supervisor Reynolds. We've seen you attempt to force your way through a security checkpoint. And we've seen you deliberately throw yourself to the ground while falsely claiming he pushed you." The color drained from Elaine's face, but she recovered quickly. "That's ridiculous. I want to see this supposed footage." "Of course," Sergeant Davis replied, nodding to the other officer who set up a tablet. As the video began playing, Elaine's expression transformed from confidence to disbelief, then to a calculated attempt at justification. This is taken out of context. He was threatening me. I felt unsafe. The audio suggests otherwise. Miss Cooper, we have clear recordings of your racial slurs, threats, and stated intention to falsify charges." For the first time, genuine panic flashed across Elaine's features. "I want my attorney present before we continue this conversation." "That's your right," Sergeant Davis acknowledged. "But I need to inform you that you're being detained for assault on a federal officer, filing a false report, and disruption of airport security procedures. These are serious federal charges." "Do you know who I am?" Elaine's voice rose, her final card to play. "Do you have any idea who I know in this city? In this state?" "Yes, Miss Cooper. We've heard all about your connections from the security footage. That information will be included in the formal report." As the reality of her situation began to sink in, Elaine's carefully constructed facade crumbled. The powerful executive was replaced by a woman facing serious consequences, perhaps for the first time in her life. Back in the security command center, Malcolm was reviewing the footage, with Sophia and Jamal still processing how quickly the situation had turned. "You saved my career," he said quietly to Sophia. "Thank you." She shook her head. "The cameras just showed the truth. You did everything by the book, even when she was provoking you." "What about your sister's hearing?" Jamal asked. Malcolm checked his watch 11:45 a.m. I'll make it as long as there's no more drama today. Chief Patterson entered the room, his face serious but satisfied. Cooper is being processed now. The airline has been notified that she won't be making her flight. We've also contacted the pharmaceutical company where she works to inform them of the situation. Sir Malcolm began, I appreciate the support, but is that last part necessary? Patterson raised an eyebrow. After what she put you through, you're concerned about her professional reputation. Malcolm considered the question. I want justice, not revenge. The legal consequences are enough. The chief studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. That's why you're good at this job, Reynolds. But in this case, we follow protocol. When someone makes threats about using their corporate position to pressure a federal agency, we document and report it. Standard procedure. As the administrative process continued, statements were gathered from witnesses who had observed the confrontation. Overwhelmingly, they corroborated Malcolm's account and the security footage. Several passengers even came forward with phone recordings that captured additional angles of the incident. By early afternoon, Malcolm was officially cleared to return to duty, though Patterson insisted he take the rest of the day off. Go to your sister's hearing. Family comes first. As Malcolm prepared to leave, the airport's public affairs officer approached. You should know that this incident has gone viral. Several passengers uploaded videos, and it's getting traction on social media. Malcolm closed his eyes briefly. The last thing he wanted was to become the next viral sensation in America's ongoing racial drama. Great, he muttered. Actually, the officer continued, once the full footage was released by airport security, the narrative shifted completely. You're being praised for your professionalism in the face of blatant provocation. His number TSA hero is trending now. It was a strange twist to an already surreal day. Malcolm thanked her for the information, though the idea of being in the public eye even positively made him uncomfortable. As he left the security area, several travelers and airport staff stopped him to offer words of support. The simple task of walking to his car became a journey through a gauntlet of well-wishers, a stark contrast to the humiliation he'd experienced just hours earlier. Behind him, Elaine Cooper was being processed for formal charges, her carefully constructed world of privilege and exception collapsing under the weight of irrefutable evidence and her own recorded words. The power dynamics she had taken for granted had been upended in a single morning, all because she couldn't be bothered to wait in line like everyone else. Malcolm reached his car, finally alone with his thoughts. He had a few hours before his sister's hearing time, enough to shower change and process the emotional whiplash of the day. As he started the engine, his phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Justice Served. See you tomorrow. For the first time since the coffee had splashed across his uniform, Malcolm smiled. Justice, indeed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the stark holding area of the airport security complex as Elaine Cooper sat rigidly on a metal bench. Her designer suit now rumpled her perfectly styled hair, beginning to fray at the edges. The facade of power and control had cracked completely, revealing the desperation beneath. Her attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, spoke in hushed, urgent tones beside her. The evidence is overwhelming, Elaine, he explained, his expression grave. Multiple camera angles, crystal clear audio, dozens of witness statements. They have you dead to rights on assault of a federal officer filing a false report and disruption of airport security procedures. These are serious federal charges. This is absurd, Elaine hissed, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. It was just coffee, and I barely touched him. The attorney shook his head. Throwing any substance at a TSA officer constitutes assault under federal law. And the staged fall, while falsely claiming he pushed you, the prosecutors will have a field day with that footage. Reality was setting in for Elaine Cooper, perhaps for the first time in decades. Her phone returned temporarily to make arrangements buzzed continuously with notifications. The incident had exploded online, with hashtags like #CoffeeKaren and #TSA Hero trending nationally. Someone had recognized her as a pharmaceutical executive, and now her company was being tagged in thousands of posts. Her attorney's phone rang, and his expression grew even more somber as he listened. "I see. Thank you for the heads up." He ended the call and turned to Elaine. "That was my contact at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The board has called an emergency meeting." The blood drained from Elaine's face. "They can't fire me. I built that division from nothing. They're concerned about brand reputation." "The video is everywhere, Elaine." For the first time, tears, genuine ones, not the performative display she had put on earlier, welled in her eyes. The carefully constructed world she had built was crumbling around her, all because she couldn't be bothered to wait in a security line like everyone else. Across town, Malcolm slid into a chair beside his sister Tamara in the county courthouse. He had just enough time to shower, change, and make it to the custody hearing. His sister squeezed his hand gratefully. "I didn't think you'd make it," she whispered. "Your text sounded serious." It was, Malcolm admitted. "I'll tell you everything later. For now, let's focus on DeAndre." As if summoned by his name, Malcolm's 8-year-old nephew peeked around the corner, his face lighting up at the sight of his uncle. Malcolm beckoned him over for a quick hug before the proceedings began. "You made it," DeAndre exclaimed. "Wouldn't miss it, little man. Not for anything." Their attorney, Miss Washington, approached with a cautiously optimistic expression. "The judge has reviewed the character references from your colleagues at TSA. She informed them. They were quite compelling." Malcolm felt a surge of gratitude, thinking about Jamal, Sophia, and even Chief Patterson, taking the time to vouch for his family's stability and character. The morning's chaos seemed distant now, though occasional twinges from his temple reminded him of the reality. The courtroom doors opened, and they filed in for the hearing. Malcolm noticed the judge glance at him with a flicker of recognition, and he realized the airport incident might have already reached her awareness. He straightened his posture, determined to demonstrate the same calm professionalism he had shown during the confrontation. Meanwhile, the video of the incident continued its viral spread across social media platforms. News outlets had picked up the story, running headlines like "Airport Altercation Exposes Racial Dynamics in Security Procedures," and "Executive Faces Charges After False Accusation Against TSA Officer." Elaine's company issued a terse statement. "Meridian Pharmaceuticals is aware of an incident involving an employee. The actions depicted do not reflect our corporate values. We are conducting a thorough investigation and will take appropriate action." By evening, when Malcolm and Tamara emerged from the courthouse, the story had evolved further. Someone had uncovered Elaine Cooper's history of complaints against service workers, revealing a pattern of entitled behavior and racial insensitivity. Former colleagues began speaking out about similar incidents within the workplace. "How did it go?" Sophia texted Malcolm. He glanced at Tamara, who was walking hand in hand with DeAndre, a relieved smile on her face. "We won," he replied simply. "Full custody granted." The judge cited our stable home environment and strong community support. "Your TSA family came through," Sophia texted back with a smiley emoji. "Oh, and you might want to avoid the news for a while. You've gone viral." Malcolm groaned inwardly. He had hoped the story would fade quickly, but the incident had clearly touched a nerve in the national conversation about race privilege and accountability. 3 days later, Meridian Pharmaceuticals announced that Elaine Cooper was no longer with the company, effective immediately. The statement emphasized their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with a substantial donation to organizations working to combat racial bias. For Elaine, the consequences continued to cascade. The charges against her would proceed through the federal court system. Her membership in several prestigious boards and committees was suspended. Former friends and associates distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the toxic fallout. In a desperate attempt at damage control, she issued a public apology, claiming stress and a momentary lapse in judgment. "This isolated incident does not reflect who I am as a person," the statement read. But the internet had receipts, a growing collection of accounts from service workers, former employees, and others who had experienced similar treatment from her over the years. Malcolm, meanwhile, found himself in an unexpected position. The TSA administration, recognizing the professionalism he had displayed under extreme provocation, offered him a promotion to senior security training specialist, focusing specifically on de-escalation techniques and conflict resolution. "You showed extraordinary restraint and judgment," the regional director told him during the offer meeting. "Those are exactly the qualities we want to instill in our training program." The promotion came with a significant salary increase, enough to help Tamara finish her nursing degree while providing even more stability for DeAndre. What had begun as a potential career-ending disaster had transformed into an unexpected opportunity. 1 month after the incident, as Malcolm was developing a new training module on professional responses to provocation, he received an email containing a news article. Elaine Cooper had entered a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. In exchange for reduced charges, she would perform 300 hours of community service pay, substantial fines, and attend mandatory diversity and sensitivity training. The article included a statement from Cooper that appeared more genuine than her initial damage control efforts I've had to confront uncomfortable truths about my behavior and assumptions. This process has been humbling and painful, but necessary. I apologize unreservedly to Supervisor Reynolds and to everyone affected by my actions. Malcolm closed the email feeling neither vindication nor resentment, just a quiet acknowledgement that accountability, however delayed, had finally arrived. The system that so often failed had in this one instance worked as intended, protected by the unblinking digital eyes that had captured the truth. That evening, as he helped DeAndre with homework at the kitchen table, Malcolm reflected on how quickly life could change, how a single confrontation had altered multiple trajectories in ways no one could have predicted when they woke up that morning. The incident would eventually fade from public memory, but its lessons about privilege, accountability, and the power of irrefutable evidence would resonate far beyond the airport security line where it all began. 3 months after the airport incident, Malcolm Reynolds stood at the front of a training room at the TSA headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Before him sat 30 senior TSA officers from across the country, all selected for advanced training in conflict resolution and de-escalation techniques. "Security isn't just about scanning bags and checking IDs," Malcolm explained, his voice carrying confidence honed through years of experience and recent recognition. "It's about managing human dynamics in high-stress environments." On the screen behind him, a series of scenarios played out simulated confrontations between passengers and officers, each presenting unique challenges. The coffee incident, as it had come to be known, was not directly referenced, but its impact on TSA protocol was evident throughout the new training materials. Malcolm had been promoted twice since that day. First to senior security training specialist at Hartsfield-Jackson, and then to his current role as a national training consultant. His approach to the airport confrontation had become a case study in professional restraint and procedural adherence. The body camera program will be implemented at 15 major airports by the end of the quarter, he announced to the group. Combined with existing security cameras, this creates a comprehensive accountability system that protects both officers and travelers. After the session ended, Malcolm checked his phone to find a message from Sophia. She had been promoted too, now heading the technical security division at Atlanta's airport. Her work in preserving and enhancing the video evidence had earned her recognition throughout the agency. "New system functioning perfectly," she texted. 6 potential incidents de-escalated this week because people knew they were being recorded. The Elaine Cooper effect in action. Malcolm smiled slightly. They rarely mentioned Elaine by name, but her impact on their professional lives was undeniable. Later that afternoon, as Malcolm packed up his materials, the regional director approached him.
That was excellent work, Reynolds. The feedback has been outstanding.
Thank you, sir. Just sharing what I've learned.
Speaking of learning, the director continued sliding a newspaper across the table. I thought you might find this interesting.
Malcolm glanced down at a small article circled in red. The headline read, "Former pharmaceutical executive completes community service speaks at diversity conference." The article included a photograph of Elaine Cooper looking noticeably less polished than she had that day at the airport, speaking to a group of corporate executives about her journey of accountability. She was quoted as saying, "My actions that day forced me to confront privileges I had always taken for granted. The consequences were severe, but necessary. I can't undo what I did, but I can use that experience to help others recognize and address their own biases." Malcolm studied the photo thoughtfully. The journey from that morning's confrontation to this moment had been unexpected for both of them. "She's been volunteering at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood," the director added. "Apparently, she's actually putting in the work, not just going through the motions." Malcolm nodded, folding the newspaper and handing it back. "Good for her." "You don't seem surprised." "Sometimes," Malcolm said. After a moment's reflection, "people need to hit rock bottom before they can see clearly. Not everyone gets that wake-up call." The conversation shifted to the next day's training schedule, but the article lingered in Malcolm's thoughts. He had never wanted vengeance against Elaine, only accountability and acknowledgement of the truth. It seemed she had received both, along with an opportunity for genuine growth. That evening, Malcolm video called home. Tamara answered looking happier and more relaxed than she had in years. Her nursing program was going well, supported by Malcolm's improved salary and the stability they now enjoyed. Uncle Malcolm DeAndre's face suddenly filled the screen, his smile wide. "Guess what? I got an A on my social studies project." "That's awesome, little man. The one about civic responsibility." "Yeah, I used your story as an example of justice working correctly." Malcolm felt a complicated mix of pride and humility. He had never sought to be an example, but if his experience could help his nephew understand the importance of integrity and accountability, perhaps some good had come from that difficult day. After the call ended, Malcolm stepped onto the balcony of his hotel room, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. His life had changed dramatically in 3 months. A new position, increased responsibility, even a few appearances on panels discussing security protocols, and implicit bias in law enforcement. His phone buzzed with a notification. A colleague had sent him a link to a professional networking site. Elaine Cooper had posted about her community service experience, mentioning without names the TSA supervisor whose professionalism in the face of my inexcusable behavior demonstrated the very best of public service. Malcolm put the phone away without responding. Some chapters were better left closed, their lessons absorbed but not reopened. The next morning, as Malcolm prepared for another training session, he encountered a situation that brought everything full circle. A frustrated traveler at the hotel security checkpoint was berating a young security officer about the inspection of his laptop bag. "Do you know who I am?" the man demanded, his voice rising. "I'm late for a meeting." The security officer maintained calm professionalism, explaining the procedure without escalating the situation. Malcolm paused, watching the interaction with a sense of déjà vu. The traveler noticed Malcolm's TSA insignia and turned to him. "Can you tell your colleague here to hurry up? Some of us have important places to be." Malcolm stepped forward, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "Sir, every traveler through this checkpoint is equally important, and security procedures apply to everyone. The officer is doing her job correctly." Something in Malcolm's tone, not confrontational but firmly grounded in unshakable principle, caused the man to reassess. He looked from Malcolm to the security officer, then back again. "Fine," he muttered, his posture deflating slightly. "Just doing your jobs. I get it." As the man collected his belongings and moved on, the security officer gave Malcolm a grateful nod. "Thanks for the backup." "That's what we do," Malcolm replied simply. In that small moment of everyday accountability, Malcolm recognized how far he had come from that morning at Atlanta's airport, not just professionally, but in his understanding of how systems change. Not through dramatic confrontations that went viral, but through thousands of small interactions where principles were upheld, professionalism was maintained, and everyone was held to the same standard. As he continued to his training session, Malcolm reflected that true justice wasn't always about dramatic consequences or public downfalls. Sometimes it was simply about creating environments where people recognized boundaries, respected others, regardless of their position, and understood that rules existed for everyone, even those who had spent lifetimes believing otherwise. The lessons of that coffee-splattered morning had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond the airport security line where it all began. For Malcolm Reynolds, that was resolution enough. This story reminds us that privilege isn't just about wealth or status, it's about believing rules apply differently to you than to others. Elaine's sense of entitlement led to consequences that money and connections couldn't erase, while Malcolm's professionalism became his greatest strength. True justice often requires irrefutable evidence. Without those security cameras capturing every moment, Malcolm's career and family stability could have been destroyed by false accusations. This highlights how technology can level playing fields previously tilted by bias and prejudice. The most powerful change happens through accountability. Elaine's transformation wasn't about public shaming, but facing genuine consequences that forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself. Malcolm's promotion wasn't about revenge, but recognizing excellence in the face of adversity. In our daily interactions, we all choose whether to be Malcolm's or Elaine's. We decide if rules apply equally to everyone, or if we deserve special treatment. These small choices reveal our character far more than grand declarations ever could. Have you ever been falsely accused like Malcolm, or witnessed someone abuse their privilege like Elaine? Share your story in the comments. If this exploration of racism and accountability resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge how we see the world. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might be fighting their own battle against discrimination or entitlement. Thank you for watching, and remember, your character isn't defined by your privilege, but by how you treat others when no one seems to be watching, except maybe a security camera.